Hey guys, tonight we drift into the warm hush of ocean winds and the soft lap of waves on moonlit shores. But not just any shore, this one is somewhere in the South Pacific, and there's no hotel in sight. Just your bare feet on coral sand, your back sore from sleeping on palm leaves, and your ears full of the rhythmic creak of outrigger canoes tethered nearby. In a few minutes, someone is going to push you onto one of those canoes, point at the horizon, and expect you to find an island over 1,000 miles away, with no compass, no GPS, and nothing but the sky, the sea, and a prayer. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake with your cheek stuck to a woven mat, the scent of sea salt and pandan leaves in your nose. Someone's humming, not a song, more like a low, repetitive tone that almost vibrates your bones. Outside the palm-thatched hut, the sun has barely crested the water, but the beach is already alive. Men and women carry long paddles and armfuls of supplies. Someone sharpens a shell knife. The outrigger canoes, long and narrow, rest half in the surf like creatures waiting to move. They're painted with symbols, sharks, stars, spirals. No one hands you sunscreen. No one asks if you know how to swim. But someone does hand you a bundle of dried taro and a tightly bound package of fermented coconut. Breakfast. Sort of. The village elder, whose face has more lines than a nautical chart, points out to sea and murmurs something about tomorrow's island. You nod. You have no idea what he means. A younger man slaps your shoulder. By, "You sail with now," he says. "He see the way." You don't know whether now is a name or a title, but 10 minutes later, you're helping to push the canoe into the water. It's slick with morning dew and heavier than you thought. Someone tosses you a paddle the size of a small oar. No instructions. As you pull away from land, the village grows small behind you, palm trees blurring into a green smear. And then it's just ocean. Nothing else. No land in any direction. Just the great blue breathing mass of the Pacific. Naui doesn't talk much. He sits at the front, bare chest, glinting with salt. His arms are ropey with muscle, his skin etched with tattoos that seem oddly directional. A turtle spiraling around his shoulder, a constellation over his ribs. You start to wonder if his chest is a map. The sun climbs higher, and the sea stretches out in lazy swells. No big waves, just a gentle rocking, but Naui watches them closely. He squints, shifts his weight, adjusts the canoe's angle. Once, he dips his hand in the water and tastes it, nods, then steers a little more westward. You ask why. He shrugs. Different salt. You paddle, and paddle. You stop to drink warm water from a gourd. You paddle again. Your arms burn. Your hands blister. The sun paints the sky in pink and brass. Still no land. Still no word from Naui. At some point, your legs fall asleep, and your mind wanders. You imagine you've gone in a giant circle. You imagine the island you left is just beyond the curve of the earth. Laughing, you imagine the canoe is alive and grumpy, and probably judging you. Then night comes. The stars arrive like a crowd of old friends, brilliant, impossible, and oddly comforting. You don't know their names. You barely remember the Big Dipper, but Naui knows them all. He begins humming again, that same low tone from the hut, and his fingers move across the sky like a conductor. He taps his thigh twice, nods, and the canoe turns slightly. The sky is his compass. No magnetic poles, no needles. Just knowledge passed from one navigator to the next, generation after generation. Some of these techniques are so refined they make modern sailors jealous and also slightly ashamed. NASA once studied Polynesian wayfinding to understand how humans navigated without instruments, and it turns out incredibly well. You're starting to relax, lulled by the water, the breeze, the stars, when a flying fish slaps you in the face. It's gone in an instant, back into the sea. You look around. No one else reacts. You think about the documentary where they said Polynesians watched bird flight paths and fish schools to judge their location. You wonder if that fish was trying to tell you something. The night stretches. You fight sleep. Naoe hums. Sometimes he changes pitch or rhythm, and you think it might be code. Historians still argue whether traditional chants were literal navigation cues or just mnemonic devices. At some point, you hallucinate a tiki god waving from a passing cloud. You blink, and it's just the moon. Then Now points ahead. Soon, he says. Soon what, you ask? He doesn't answer and just points. You squint into the darkness. Maybe you see something. A shadow. A low ripple on the horizon. You hope it's land. You hope it's not another fish. The canoe creaks. The stars shift. You feel small, deeply out of your depth, and oddly alive. You wake with your chin resting awkwardly on the canoe's edge and your lower back reminding you that this boat wasn't designed for ergonomic support. Dawn is breaking, just barely a pale smear of gold between sea and sky. You glance at Naoe, who hasn't moved in hours. He still sits like a statue, his eyes closed but somehow still alert. You wonder if he ever sleeps. Maybe he just hibernates between voyages. The canoe rocks gently. You stretch and yawn, big mistake. Naoe smacks your paddle with his own. Watch, he says, pointing to the water. You look? Nothing, just waves. Then you realize they're not random. The swells move in intersecting rhythms, crossing over each other like invisible ropes stretched taut across the sea. There's a subtle shift in direction, like one current is pushing under another. Naoe lifts a hand and taps 2 fingers against his temple. Swells from east, another from south. They meet, means land once that way. Once, not now. Polynesian wayfinders could read the ocean like a book, though frankly, it feels more like trying to read Braille while being slapped repeatedly with seaweed. The wayfinding method they used is called ETAC. It's less about where you are and more about where everything else is in relation to you. Picture this, instead of thinking I'm here. They imagine a reference island moving beneath them while they stay still. It's mind-bending. It's brilliant. It's also something your GPS app would short-circuit over. Naoe adjusts course again. No compass, no tools, just water, light, gut instinct, and ancestral memory. A flock of birds appears on the horizon, long-tailed tropic birds. Naoe watches their flight. Some circle and dip. Others slice through the air with purpose. You follow his gaze. Which way, you ask? He raises an eyebrow. Which bird? You hate this game already. You paddle as the sun climbs, the heat growing thick and gluey. Your lips crack with salt. Your thighs stick to the wooden seat. Your right shoulder clicks every time you row. Still, no sign of land. Then Naoe hums again, this time louder. It's not random, there's rhythm. Almost a melody. You don't recognize it, but it feels deliberate. He gestures for silence and stares at the clouds. You squint too. At first, you see nothing but puffs of white. Then you notice one strange cloud, flat-bottomed, low-hanging, faintly gray. That one, he says. You nod as if you understand. You absolutely don't. Turns out, Polynesian navigators often used cloud formations as island indicators. Islands heat the air differently, creating distinct cloud bases. Some even cause subtle green reflections on the underside of the clouds, a phenomenon still debated by scientists and occasionally dismissed as sailor myth, but it works. Apparently, Naui steers slightly north. You drift. Time loses shape. You wonder if you've crossed into some alternate oceanic dimension where nothing matters except the angle of a puff of air. Then, Naui stops the canoe. Just like that. Paddles up. Silence. You wait. You sip from a gourd. You try to hum back at him. He frowns. Listen, he whispers. You close your eyes. And you hear something. A faint, hollow resonance in the water. A change in how the canoe sways. A distant echo of waves breaking not near you, but somewhere out there. It's like the ocean is whispering secrets. You suddenly realize how deaf you've been all your life. Reef, Naoi says quietly. Still far, but soon. You're starting to get it now. Polynesian wayfinding isn't about tools or tech. It's about tuning in. Really tuning in to every subtle message the sea and sky send. The temperature on your skin, the vibration of the hull, the glint on the water, the fatigue in your bones. It's total immersion, and no app can replicate it. Historians still argue whether this mastery is teachable or if it required growing up in the rhythm of the sea. Some claim the ancient navigators had sixth senses, or special neuroplasticity. Others suggest generations of practice created bodies and brains literally adapted for wayfinding. You think of your own morning routine coffee, phone screen, forgetting where you left your keys. Naui hasn't looked at a clock in his life, but he knows when he's 47 miles southeast of a reef that hasn't been above sea level in 3 centuries. Eventually, he hands you the paddle. Try. You freeze. Try what? He points to the clouds. Where now? You paddle left, then correct right, then try to mimic his earlier angle. The canoe wobbles, the swell slaps the hull, and Naui sighs audibly. You paddle like drunk goat. You accept this as fair? Eventually, you find a rhythm, sort of, he hums again, softer this time. You try to follow the melody with the stroke. It sort of works. You think, maybe, possibly, okay, probably not. But now nods, just once. Then he dips his fingers into the sea and flicks droplets over your head like a blessing or a very passive-aggressive baptism. That night, you sleep fitfully under the stars. The canoe rocks gently. The sky spins slowly. Somewhere far below, tectonic plates shift under the sea. And somewhere ahead, a reef breaks the waves with a whisper only the wise can hear. You dream of birds that sing in constellations and waves that form words in your ears. You're not a wayfinder yet, but you're starting to listen. You wake up to something cold slapping your foot. It's seawater. Again. Your left ankle is dangling over the side of the canoe, and a mischievous wave has decided to make itself known. You jolt up your back, complaining. Your eyes sticky with sleep, and there's Now, crouched at the bow, inspecting something invisible on the surface of the water, like it's a crossword puzzle. His fingers trace a small pattern on the wood, and you notice faintly that he's using the swell to sketch in real time. No words, no map, just a short trail of notches. Then a pause. He grunts, points at you, then at the stars. Oh no, it's quiz day! Your first test as a navigator's apprentice begins before breakfast and ends whenever you stop embarrassing yourself. You look up at the fading sky. Dawn is unraveling the constellations, but a few still cling to the western edge like they overslept. You recognize the one that looks like a bent spoon, maybe. You try to orient the canoe using it, but Naui shakes his head and mutters something under his breath that probably translates to this idiot thinks Ursa Minor is a steering wheel. You're not off to a great start. Still, he begins your training in earnest. The lessons come wordlessly. When you ask something direct like, "How do you know which way to go?" he just grins and says, "I don't. The canoe does." Cool, thanks. Turns out there is a system, an invisible one. Polynesian navigators used reference stars. Dozens, even hundreds of them, arranged in rising and setting lines along the horizon. Each star corresponds to a direction, and each direction is locked into memory not with charts, but with chants. Long, musical memory systems encoded the entire navigational map of the Pacific Ocean into stories, rhythms, and metaphors. You try to hum one. You fail. Then Naui taps your chest. You don't remember with your brain. You remember with your bones. Which is encouraging and deeply unhelpful. Still, you try. You start to feel the roll of the swell. You try to track which star lines up with which part of the boat. You begin to notice that the ocean swells always seem to push from the same direction even when the wind changes. It's subtle, like being taught to hear harmonies in white noise. Mid-morning, Naui decides it's time for you to steer. He moves to the side and folds his arms. Go. Go where? He closes his eyes. You know. You very much don't know, but you paddle anyway. The canoe wobbles like a toddler on roller skates. You correct, overcorrect, paddle too hard, then not enough. The sky glares down at you, the sun making everything blinding. You try to feel the current, the pressure against the hull, the sound of the bow slicing through chop. You try to be the canoe, whatever that means. After maybe an hour, Naui wordlessly takes back control. You assume this means you're demoted to snack duty. You're okay with this. Lunch is, if we can call it, that half a coconut and some dried breadfruit. No salt, no utensils. You eat with your hands and throw scraps to the sea. A large bird watches you, possibly judging. By now, you've learned that everything in this world, the canoe, the sea, the sky, the snacks, is part of a network. Nothing is separate. The canoe isn't just a vehicle, it's an instrument, a partner. Naui even apologizes to it once, after he bumps it too hard during a turn. He rests his hand on the wood and mutters something like, "Sorry, old friend." You find this adorable until you realize he's serious. Polynesians treated their canoes with deep reverence. These weren't just boats, they were spiritual companions. Some even had names, ancestral backstories, and rituals of birth and burial. Historians still debate whether the practice was purely symbolic or embedded with encoded wayfinding data like memory palaces carved into wood. As afternoon fades, you start to understand why. The canoe keeps you alive. It floats when the world below wants to swallow you whole. It hums with the sea. When you close your eyes and press your hand to its ribs, you swear you can hear a pulse. That evening, the air grows sticky and heavy, stormy. Naui says nothing, but his jaw tightens. The sky changes color, pale yellow bleeding into bruised purple. The wind picks up, slicing cold now. The swells, once gentle, grow sharp and staggered. "Reef nearby," he mutters. "Need to shift?" You hold on. The canoe bucks. Lightning flashes in the far distance just once, but enough to turn your stomach. You paddle harder, trying to match Naui's rhythm. He steers blind, using muscle memory and instinct and things you can't even perceive. You glimpse something, a pattern in the waves, a color shift on the water. Naui reacts immediately. Back left side. You switch. The canoe lurches and glides sideways, just missing something jagged in the surf. It's not a full island, maybe a submerged reef, maybe a ghost island, one of those spots that only exist when the tides are perfect and the moon's in the right mood. Sailors talk about them in hushed tones. Scientists dismiss them. You now believe in all of them. The rain never comes. The storm sighs and veers away. You keep paddling. Late that night, exhausted and achy, you ask Naui, "How do you know?" He looks at you, amused. "I don't know. I feel..." He then points to your chest. "One day, you will feel too." You hope that day arrives before you get sunstroke. The canoe hums. The stars pulse overhead. The sea, for all its mystery, carries you like a cradle. And despite your sore arms, despite your utter lack of comprehension, you sleep soundly. The first thing you notice when you wake is that something's missing. It takes you a second to realize what it is. Sound. The wind has stilled. The waves are lazy, lapping gently like the ocean's taking a nap. Even now is quiet, not humming, not grumbling, not scolding your posture. The air is heavy, and the canoe drifts like a leaf on still water. You sit up slowly. The sky is a bright, blank sheet. No clouds, no birds, just endless blue above, and below, and around. The sun stares you down like it's trying to test your loyalty. Then now gestures to the horizon. There, he says. You squint. Nothing. An island, you ask? He shrugs. Maybe. Great. Welcome to one of the most unsettling parts of ancient Polynesian navigation, the islands that may or may not exist. Naoe tells you you're approaching what some call a ghost island, though that's not quite the term he uses. His word translates roughly to place that used to be, or place that only shows itself to certain people. You ask how he knows it's there. He responds, "The sea told me?" You consider arguing, but you've seen weirder things in the past 48 hours. Historians still argue whether these phantom islands were real volcanic atolls that later submerged, mirages created by specific cloud and light conditions, or complete mythologies carried on salt wind. Some of these lost places even showed up on European maps well into the 18th century, marked with names like Davis Land or St. Matthew Island, only to quietly vanish in later editions. You try to see what Now sees. He points out faint reflections in the sky, a weird ripple in the clouds, the way the swell behaves like it's being disturbed by something underwater. Land changes sea, he says. The canoe turns slightly. Naoe's hands guide it like it's an extension of himself. You paddle too, unsure whether you're heading toward real land, an illusion, or just a story being reenacted for your benefit. A few hours pass in this watery limbo. The sun is oppressive. You drape a cloth over your head like a tired pilgrim. Naoe seems entirely unbothered. His eyes scan the distance like he's reading a scroll only he can see. Then, you see it? A shape, low, dark, possibly an island or possibly a very confident cloud. It hovers just above the horizon, fuzzy and shimmering. You gasp. Naoe doesn't even blink. Still far, he says. You paddle harder. The shape gets bigger, more solid. You can make out what looks like trees, or are those tricks of the light. Your arms ache, but you keep going. The canoe moves steadily, cutting the sea with a whisper. And then, it's gone. Poof, just like that. One moment there, the next. Nothing but ocean and sky. You freeze. Naoe sighs like someone who's seen this before. Gone, he says. Wrong mood. The island's in a bad mood. He shrugs. Maybe you are. You slump in place. All that paddling, all that hope, for a place that might never have been there. It's like being ghosted by geography. Still, you're told not to be discouraged. The ancient navigators accepted these phenomena as part of the journey. You don't curse the mirage, you honor it. You acknowledge its presence, even if it never gives you anything back. Polynesian navigation isn't about absolutes. It's about possibilities, interpretations, patience. You have to be okay with chasing something that might be real, or might be memory, or might be the ocean's way of checking if you're paying attention. To lighten the mood, Naoe tells a story, his version of a navigator's joke. Once, he begins, a young man sailed for the island his grandfather dreamed of. He followed the stars. He followed the birds. He followed the swell. But every time he got close, The island vanished. You wait. What happened to him? Naoe shrugs. He married a reef and had 6 children made of coral. You blink. That's not how children work. Reef children very quiet, he says. You make a mental note not to ask him for relationship advice. By afternoon, your morale is soggy, like your shirt. You're tired of squinting at the horizon. You're tired of chasing ghosts. You want a proper island with a snack stand and maybe a hammock. But this, Naoe says, is part of the training. Sometimes you must believe in something even when it disappears. The ocean doesn't owe you an explanation. He tells you the ancients used to name these vanishing lands. Some were sacred, some were dangerous, others were tests. If you saw one, it meant the ocean trusted you to decide whether it mattered. Sometimes, he says, island is only story. You close your eyes. You try to feel the sea, the wind, the weight of the canoe. You imagine the shape of the land that was almost there. You picture the roots of trees brushing your hull from below. You whisper an apology to the place that didn't show up. Later that night, Naoe sings. It's low, slow, and in a language you don't know, but you catch something in the tune. Sadness, reverence, maybe longing. You wonder if the song is for the island, or for people who chased it and never came back. As you drift into sleep, you think about all the lost places that shaped human history without ever being found, about how many stories are made of almosts, about how sometimes, even when the map says empty, the sea remembers. And maybe, just maybe, tomorrow it'll let you see. The next morning, Naoe wakes you up with a bowl of seawater, not to wash your face with. To drink? You blink at him. Surely, you've misunderstood. But no, he nods seriously and holds out the bowl, as if offering fine wine. It's water, you say slowly. He grins. Yes, taste. You hesitate, but Nao is not the kind of man you argue with when you're on a canoe hundreds of miles from land and dependent on his good graces to not end up as fish food. So, you take a sip. It's exactly what you expected. Salt and fish breath and existential despair. You gag a little. North side saltier, Naoe says matter-of-factly. You stare at him. You tell direction by how salty the water is. He nods like it's the most obvious thing in the world. And believe it or not, he's not completely making it up. Ancient Polynesian navigators paid attention to subtle changes in water texture and taste salinity levels, temperatures, even the presence of different microscopic organisms that altered how the water felt on the skin. Historians still argue whether this was more myth than method, but sailors insisted it worked. One elder navigator once claimed he could tell when he was approaching certain islands just from the sweetness in the current. You swirl the seawater in your mouth again like a connoisseur. Still tastes like betrayal. Too much tongue, Naoe says with a smirk. You use lips? You file that under phrases that sound weird out of context. He points out again into the blue. Now paddle. We chase the cool stream. Turns out there are underwater currents, deep, cold rivers in the sea that run between islands. Skilled navigators could sense them by the way the canoe moved, by subtle dips in water temperature, even by changes in marine life. A sudden patch of jellyfish might mean you've crossed into a new stream. Flying fish leaping westward might mean you're riding it just right. You paddle. You listen. You taste water now and then, hoping to detect something other than salt. Maybe cinnamon. Maybe plot development. The canoe moves faster now, gliding smoothly. Naoe nods in satisfaction. You feel he asks, feel what? Flow. You close your eyes, and, okay, maybe something is different. The rhythm under your body has changed. You're no longer bobbing. You're sailing, effortlessly, as if the ocean has grabbed the canoe's hand and started leading. You open your eyes, I think I feel it. Naoe hums in approval, then says, "Now we check the sun." He tosses a small piece of polished shell into the water. It floats for a moment, catching the sunlight, and he watches the way the shadows bend across the surface. You try it too. You squint and squint until your eyes water, but all you see is shiny water. Apparently, navigators used sun reflection angles to estimate latitude, along with the sun's height at noon and the length of shadows. It wasn't precise like a sextant, but it worked well enough to cross thousands of miles without losing your family or your lunch. And they didn't stop there. Naoe picks up a scoop of sand from a small pouch. Where did the sand come from? You don't know. It's like he has a Mary Poppins bag full of natural props. He drizzles the sand over the water and watches how the grains fall, some sinking fast, some spiraling gently. Different grains, he explains, means land nearby changed tide pattern. Lighter sand floats longer here. You nod, pretending to understand. This is the part of the voyage where things stop being fun facts and start becoming sorcery. By midday, your brain is fried. Too much salt, too much sun, too much abstract oceanic poetry from a man who speaks in riddles and drinks seawater like it's kombucha. You ask, was there ever a time when people just got lost? Naoe thinks for a long moment. Then he says, yes, some did, but many found what they were not looking for. And you realize something. Wayfinding wasn't just navigation, it was discovery. These were people who launched canoes into a horizon that held absolutely no promises and somehow kept going. They found islands the size of pebbles in an ocean the size of the sky. They planted trees, built homes, carved culture out of coral and wind. All without Google Maps. You're beginning to grasp just how impossible this knowledge would be to learn today. Not just because of the skill, but because the world itself has changed. Sea routes are different. Pollution and climate change have altered currents. Light pollution has dimmed the stars. Even traditional training grounds are disappearing. Only a few true wayfinding masters remain. And they're not exactly handing out weekend workshops. You lean over the side and stare into the deep, the greenish blue stretching into oblivion. Somewhere down there are shipwrecks, sunken canoes, lost names. You try to imagine what it would feel like to really know this sea not as an obstacle, but as a friend. Then a flying fish launches itself directly into your lap. You shriek. Naoe laughs for the first time in days. You pick up the fish, gently, and toss it back. It flops away like it has places to be. Naoe nods. Good sign. You think maybe he's just saying that to make you feel better. But who knows? Maybe the fish knows something you don't. That night, as the stars come out, you don't bother naming them anymore. You just listen. To the canoe, to the waves, to the stories hanging between the crests. You dip a finger in the water. Still salty, still ancient, still carrying you somewhere. You dream of birds. Not crows or pigeons, but sleek seabirds' terns, frigates, tropic birds with tails like ribbons gliding across your vision like silent messengers. When you wake, there's one perched right on the bow of the canoe, looking at you like you're the unusual species. Nao's already awake, of course. You're not entirely convinced he sleeps. He gestures toward the bird. Tell us something. You blink the last of sleep from your eyes, like what? Where land is. You stare at the bird, it poops, then it flies away. Welcome to another day in the endless University of the Pacific. This morning, your lecture is on the use of wildlife as navigational tools. Turns out, ancient Polynesians didn't just watch birds casually, they knew them intimately. Which birds circled far from land? Which ones stayed close? How long they could fly? What times of day they returned? And, perhaps most importantly, how to tell if they were actually going somewhere or just messing with you. Naoe explains that terns and noddies rarely fly more than about 40 miles from land. So if you see them in numbers, circling and dipping, land is likely close. Frigate birds, on the other hand, can roam farther but often return at night, especially to roost. You spot one gliding high overhead, and Naoe tilts his head. Evening direction. That way, he points northwest. Historians still debate how precise these techniques were. Some scholars argue that using birds alone would be wildly unreliable. Others say experienced navigators could combine bird behavior with star charts, swells, and scent patterns to triangulate their position with uncanny accuracy. Like a human GPS, but with feathers. Later in the day, you spot a sudden glimmer of water behaving strangely. It's a shimmer, a swirl like something's cooking just beneath the surface. Naoe calls it a boiling patch. It move, he asks. You nod. It shifts slightly, bubbling in place like an underwater spring or restless fish. Good, he says. No reef, just food. He tosses a line overboard. Within minutes, he pulls up something silvery and muscular, a skipjack tuna. He grins. You're not sure if you're expected to name it or gut it. Turns out, it's the latter. Lunch is fresh, raw, and unexpectedly delicious. You chew slowly, tasting more than fish. You taste motion, current, salt, maybe even the faint echo of the reef far below. In fact, reefs are next on today's syllabus. You spot a darker patch in the water up ahead, faint but ominous. Naoe frowns. Check with paddle. You reach over and jab your paddle downward. It meets resistance. Solid. Coral, you say. Dead or live? You shrug. He sighs, still soft-brained. He steers around the patch with practiced ease. Coral reefs are both threat and treasure. A sharp one can tear open a canoe's belly like it's made of paper. But a friendly reef near an island is a lifesaver. It calms waves, shelters fish, and offers clams the size of dinner plates. You've learned to read these patches, the way shadows move beneath the surface, how their texture and color tells you whether you're safe or very much about to make the evening news. At one point, Naoe crouches and holds out his hand again, palm up. He sniffs the wind. Then he smiles. I smell pandan. You inhale, nothing. But he insists. Turns out, when land is close, especially fertile, plant-covered land, the wind sometimes carries faint traces of it. Flowers, soil, even fruit. In ancient times, navigators would know the specific smells of their destination islands. That seems impossible to you, but now he insists the sea has a nose if you know how to borrow it. You paddle on. Birds crisscross the sky like they're drawing invisible maps. The sun swings westward. A school of flying fish startles you by leaping in perfect formation, as if choreographed. Fish go where waves go, Naoe says. You nod. Waves go where? Home. Cryptic, but comforting. And then comes the weirdest part of the day. A moment when everything sky, water, wind, even your thoughts seem to sink. The canoe glides so smoothly it feels like you're not moving at all. The horizon glows with a lazy gold. The birds call softly overhead. Your paddle dips in rhythm with Naoe's. Your breath matches the swell. For the first time since this journey began, you belong. This is what wayfinders called feeling the path. It's not about memorizing coordinates. It's about entering the rhythm of the ocean so completely that the direction becomes obvious. It's not magic, it's attention. You realize this ancient system doesn't just rely on external cues. It requires internal quiet, a listening that runs deeper than ears. You're not just watching for signs, you're allowing the world to speak through you. And maybe that's the trick. Ancient wayfinding didn't make the world smaller, It made you bigger, stretched your senses to their edge, made you capable of becoming something more than just a body in a boat. You look at Nao. He hasn't spoken in hours, but he's smiling. "You're learning," he says. You smile back, a little proud. Then a bird drops something on your head. Nao laughs until he wheezes. You're not enlightened yet, but you're getting there. That night, the sky is unusually clear. The stars look close enough to grab. You lie back on the canoe, letting the motion cradle you like a hammock. A bird cries once, then is gone. And in the hush, the water whispering beneath you, the ghost scent of pandan somewhere in the dark, you finally fall asleep smiling. You wake up singing. Well, not exactly singing, but humming something low and strange. A rhythm that doesn't come from memory, but from somewhere deeper. Maybe from the ocean. Maybe from Naui's countless chants. Maybe just from being in this floating cradle too long. Nao's already awake, obviously, and now he's tattooing something in the air with his finger. Lines, circles, swirls. You sit up, your neck stiff, and watch as he taps invisible points along his arm, then across his chest. "Map," he says simply. You blink. You're drawing a map on yourself. "No," he replies, "it's already there." And that's how you learn that some ancient Polynesian navigators carried entire map systems not in their heads, but on their skin. Tattooing wasn't just decorative, it was a living archive. A shoulder spiral might represent the movement of a current. A series of dots down the arm could stand for known islands in a chain. A constellation traced around the collarbone might show where to turn when a particular star hit the horizon. These weren't just symbols, they were tactile, permanent tools. You carried your knowledge, literally. Historians still argue whether these tattoos were purely symbolic or actual reference systems. But on some islands, stories remain of navigators who tapped their own arms to remember a route and never got lost. Naoi shows you a faded ring around his wrist. "Circle of salt," he says. "My teacher said, if you leave this circle, you are alone." You don't ask what happened if someone left the circle. Instead, you ask about the chance. Because lately, Naoi has been murmuring songs under his breath. They're not tunes in any way you'd recognize, no chorus, no beat, no catchy hook, but they're deliberate, patterned, and oddly hypnotic. One night, he hummed for 2 hours straight, never repeating a phrase. These are memory songs, an ancient Polynesian method of oral mapping. Think of them as GPS directions with a melody. Each line might encode a sailing direction, an island name, a type of bird you'll see, a warning about a reef. The trick, they're usually sung in motion, aligning with paddling strokes or star shifts. Some could be over an hour long. You try to memorize a short one. Naoi teaches you a phrase, something about paddle left under the red star. Watch the coconut wind. You repeat it 10 times and forget it by noon. Polynesian apprentices took years to commit these verses to memory, often from childhood. You, in comparison, are trying to cram an ocean into your brain in a week. Not ideal. By midday, Naoi stops paddling. He looks at you and says something you can't quite interpret, half joke, half challenge. Then he turns the canoe around, not a full spin, but a wide arc. You panic? Wait, are we lost? No, he says, you are. And that's your next lesson. He makes you guide, you, with your semi-remembered songs, your star charts made of shoulder freckles, and your dreams of birds. You paddle north. No, wait, west. You squint at the sky, try to hum the chant again, and promptly mess it up. Naoi doesn't interfere. He just watches, occasionally coughs meaningfully. After an hour of sweaty flailing and spiraling currents, you finally point at a cloud on the horizon. There, that's land, probably. Naoi squints. He nods. You exhale dramatically. Then he says, "That cloud is a fish." You slump. But slowly, you are improving. You start catching the swell angles quicker. You don't need to look at Naui for every course correction. You only drop your paddle in the ocean twice that day, an all-time low. In the afternoon, the clouds thicken and the light flattens. The stars will be hidden tonight. You panic, but Naui seems unbothered. "No stars, no worry," he says. "You have bones." You'd argue, but your ribs are sore from paddling and probably are pointing toward the right direction by now. Instead, Naui teaches you something called puku gut feeling. Real navigators learn to steer by intuition built over years of sensing shifts in wind, wave, pressure, even color. Some even claim to see direction inside their minds, as if the sea had left glowing fingerprints on their thoughts. You try to find that feeling. You close your eyes, breathe with the canoe, listen to the hull creak. You imagine the chants stitched into your skin. You imagine your body is the map. And then you actually feel it. A tug, subtle but real. A sense of pull, not from the canoe, but from within. You shift your paddle just slightly, and Naui doesn't say a word. He just hums one of those long, low memory songs. That night, clouds cover everything. No moon, no stars, just black ocean and black sky and you and a boat and a man who once memorized 100 islands by listening to birds and tasting water. And you're starting to understand. Maybe you could never really learn this. Not the way Naui did. Not in the way that lives in bones and skin and lullabies. But for now, you can float in its echo. Somewhere in the dark, waves guide you forward. And your humming carries you home. You wake in a mood. You don't know if it's hunger, sun fatigue, or the creeping suspicion that you're slowly turning into a piece of dried fish jerky. But today, everything feels off. The sea is too calm. The sky too pale. Even Naui's usual wordless humming is absent. He doesn't speak as he hands you the paddle. He just points ahead and settles into the front of the canoe like a judge waiting to see if the defendant will figure out how to steer without crashing into the Pacific. You paddle. Poorly. Of course. After a while, you drop the paddle across your lap. "This isn't working," you mutter. Naui finally speaks. You stop. Canoes still go. You glance at the water. It is still moving. You're drifting slowly, carried by an invisible force. You frown. "So, what, the canoe's smarter than me?" He grins. "Yes." And just like that, today's lesson begins. In traditional Polynesian thought, canoes weren't just tools. They were beings, partners, even teachers. The act of building one involved spiritual rituals, choosing the right tree, offering prayers, speaking to the ancestors. Each part had a purpose, each curve a meaning. The canoe was alive in its own way. If treated with respect, it would carry you safely. If not, well, the sea has a way of reminding you who's boss. You look at the canoe beneath you, smooth wood, lashings of fiber still holding strong, carved strakes that ripple with salt marks and age. You realize you've never actually thanked the canoe. Naui nods approvingly, as if reading your mind. Now you listen. To what? To her? Right. You place your palm flat on the canoe's side. It's warm, humming faintly with each swell. You close your eyes, letting your body sway with it, trying to feel what Naui seems to feel without effort. You imagine the canoe speaking, not in words, but in nudges, in squeaks of tensioned rope, in subtle yaws and dips, in how the wind catches your cheek. You remember a story Naui told you one night about a canoe that refused to leave shore because the navigator had quarreled with his brother. They made up, and the canoe floated out like a feather. Historians, of course, chalk these stories up to symbolism, but many Pacific communities still speak of canoes as spirits, ancestors reborn, vehicles of the soul. You start to think now might not be your only teacher on this voyage. The day drifts by in quiet observation. Naoe teaches you how to read the canoe's mood by how it sits in the water. Too heavy in the stern, bad trim. Leaning left, you've got a cross current or an uneven load. When the canoe moves smoothly, it feels like gliding through silk. When it's upset, it slaps the water like a toddler at bath time. You learn to balance not just physically, but emotionally. You stop fidgeting. You adjust your seat. You paddle with intention, not aggression. And the canoe rewards you by moving straighter, faster. Now, Naoe says, you part of her. You don't even feel insulted. By afternoon, you hit a rough patch. Swells grow taller, sharper. Wind angles shift. The canoe shudders with each slap of water. You look at Naoe. He doesn't seem worried, but he does start whispering. You lean closer. He's not talking to you. He's talking to the canoe. Apologizing for the chop, for the hard turns, for making her work so hard. He strokes the rail like you'd soothe a nervous horse. You, meanwhile, are clenching everything. But the canoe, impossibly, seems to respond. The slaps ease. The ride smooths. You both sit in silence as the sea roars around you, but the canoe glides on. See, Naoe says softly, she still loves us. You want to cry a little, possibly from relief, possibly from the fact that you're on a talking boat in the middle of nowhere, and it's the most emotionally stable relationship you've had in years. As the weather calms again, Naoe begins to teach you a chant, not just a navigation song, but one specifically for canoes, a blessing, a lullaby, a thank you. You don't understand most of the words, but you try to echo him phonetically. You mess it up, of course. He grins. She understands. That evening, the sky is cotton candy pink. The stars begin to prick through, one by one. The canoe creaks softly, comfortably. You're not sure if it's the wood shifting or her way of chuckling. You run your hand along the side and whisper, "Thank you." The canoe doesn't answer, not in any obvious way. But she keeps you dry that night, even when the swell tries to climb aboard. And that's enough. You fall asleep with your hand still resting on the wood, as if you might drift off together. You wake up underwater. Or at least, that's what your half-conscious brain decides as your face is drenched by an aggressive splash of seawater. The canoe pitches sharply. Waves slap its sides. The wind, which had been so gentle yesterday, is now tugging hard at your ears like an impatient aunt. Naoe is already bailing water. He doesn't look alarmed, but his focus is razor-sharp. You follow his lead, grabbing a scoop and tossing water overboard as fast as your sleepy limbs allow. The canoe bucks again. Your stomach flips. Something in the air has changed pressure, temperature, rhythm. The storm has arrived. Not a hurricane, but not a drizzle either. The kind of sea tantrum that makes you question every decision you've ever made, including the one where you thought, sure, I'll let a guy who drinks seawater teach me ancient ocean magic. Rain needles your shoulders. Wind spins your hair into salt sculptures. The sky above is iron gray and starless. The sea hisses. And yet Naoe is singing? Not a chant this time, but a melody with no words. Something low and steady. A tune you can barely hear over the wind. At first, you think it's just for comfort. Then you realize he's using it to steer. "Keep tempo," he shouts. "Canoe needs rhythm." You paddle. The beat becomes your anchor. Your arms follow the melody like a metronome. The canoe groans but begins to find a cadence each slap of wave, each stroke, matching Naoe's voice. The idea of singing to control a boat sounds insane, but it's real. Polynesian navigators used rhythm to stabilize canoes in storms. The body became a metronome, syncing with waves. Some oral traditions even describe sailors who calmed storms by harmonizing with the ocean's voice. You want to believe it? Because right now, the ocean sounds angry. Lightning forks in the distance, not close, but close enough to remind you how small your wooden world is. You can't see the horizon. The swell is higher than your head now. Naoe calls out star names, even though none are visible. You realize he's not guessing. He's remembering. Where the stars would be. Where they should be. His internal sky map is so deeply embedded that even the clouds can't take it away. Historians still argue whether this level of memorization is even humanly possible. Some say it's exaggerated folklore. But neuroscientists who've studied modern wayfinding masters, yes, they found parts of their brain unusually active, especially when recalling star positions. Your brain, meanwhile, is mostly screaming. The canoe crests another wave. Your stomach drops like you're on the worst water park ride ever invented. You shout something, probably a prayer, maybe a very personal review of your life choices. Then, mid-panic, you hear it again. That song? Nao's melody hasn't changed. Even with rain in his eyes and wind clawing at his shirt, he keeps singing. The song is your compass, your sail, your heartbeat. It holds the boat together. It holds you together. And then you're through. Not all at once. The rain lightens, the swell eases, the sky stops growling. The canoe glides again, like a startled horse catching its breath. You slump forward, gasping. Your arms tremble. Your throat is dry. You've never been more exhausted. Naoe looks back at you, nods once. That's your reward. You met the sea spirit, he says. You blink at him. She's intense. He chuckles. She likes to test. Turns out, storms weren't just feared, they were respected. Polynesians saw them as moods of the ocean, sometimes tied to ancestral spirits. If you survived one, it wasn't just luck, it meant you were worthy. You didn't die. That's a start. That night, the sea glows faintly with bioluminescence. Each paddle stroke leaves a shimmer behind. You trail your hand in the water and watch green sparks swirl around your fingers. It feels like the sea is rewarding you, or maybe just showing off. Naoe sits quietly, staring into the black. What do you see, you ask? He answers without looking. Dreams. Old ones? You don't ask what that means. You're too tired. Your body is humming with leftover adrenaline. Your hands ache. Your ears still ring from the wind. But as you lie back in the canoe, watching the shimmer behind you fade into darkness, you realize something. You're not afraid anymore. You trust the canoe. You trust the sea. You might even trust yourself. And as Naoe begins to hum again, quieter now, like a lullaby, you close your eyes and fall into a sleep so deep, not even the sea spirit could wake you. You wake to riddles. Not metaphorical ones, actual riddles. Naoe is staring at you with the expression of someone who's waited just long enough for you to become comfortable before hitting you with a surprise quiz. He points to the eastern sky, where a streak of pink cuts across the clouds. When the red feather sings before the breadfruit wakes, what do? You squint at him. Go back to sleep, you offer. Naoe grunts. Wrong answer. Apparently, it's test day. Today's lesson, star riddles, cloud puzzles, and celestial games. Polynesian navigation's final exams, delivered not with pens and paper, but in proverbs and poetic traps. You quickly realize that traditional wayfinders didn't just memorize directions, they internalized them through metaphor. A certain star might be called the shark's tooth, and its rising above the hull could mean You're too far west. A particular breeze might be the cousin of sleeping wind, which means expect a storm by evening. These phrases are beautiful. They're also maddening. Historians still debate whether these riddles were intentionally cryptic to keep sacred knowledge within specific families or priest-navigator classes. Others argue it was simply the most effective way to encode memory in a pre-literate culture through vivid images and rhythmic turns of phrase. You ask now to repeat the red feather thing. He rolls his eyes, cloud shape like feather, comes before sunrise, means warm wind, means you paddle southeast. You nod, obviously. The day continues like this. He points at the sky, when the sky sleeps on its left arm. You stare. Means wind from north, he says, pushes you off path. Of course. He grins. You get one right later by accident. He points at a cluster of low clouds with a line of birds flying just above it and asks, when the birds race the horizon, what must be near? You take a wild guess. Land. Naoe pauses, nods. You savor that tiny victory like it's dessert. Throughout the day, you begin to see the riddles not as arbitrary tests, but as bridges between logic and instinct, between symbols and the sensory world. They help turn an overwhelming flood of data waves, birds, wind, stars into bite-sized poetic wisdom. By afternoon, Naoe gives you your final riddle. When the sky wears two belts, but neither fits, what will the ocean do? You consider it. You glance at the horizon, two horizontal bands of cloud, unevenly spaced. A wind is rising. Change, you say? The ocean will change. Nao nods slowly. You are learning. But before you can gloat, he adds, still paddle like frightened chicken. Progress is relative. The second part of your test is even harder. No hints. Naoe lies back and closes his eyes. You lead. No words. Just feel. You hesitate. The canoe drifts. The sky is clear now. But you know from experience that clarity is often followed by chaos. You paddle. Not quickly, just with purpose. You watch the birds. You watch the waves. You try to hear that subtle music again, the one you heard the night after the storm. That deeper current, that rhythm beneath the sea. And slowly, the canoe begins to respond. You nudge slightly left. The bow rises. The sun angles just so across the water. A patch of seaweed drifts by. You smell something faint, something green. And that's when you see it. On the horizon, low and shimmering, is something you've learned to both trust and distrust, a faint gray blur beneath the sky. Cloud shadow, you ask? Now he doesn't answer. He's still pretending to nap. But he smiles. You paddle a bit harder. The shape gets firmer, more distinct. You can see now something flat, low, maybe green, maybe not. You don't cheer this time. You just paddle, patiently, steadily. Because land, as you've learned, is a promise that can vanish. The wind shifts, you adjust. The birds fly lower, you keep time. The clouds hold their belts. The sea holds its breath. And still, you don't speak. You just move forward. Naoe finally opens his eyes as the sun begins to sink, casting long golden fingers across the sea. You steer well, he says softly. You blink, even with my chicken paddling? He grins, now more like turtle. Still slow, but wise. You'll take it. That night, you don't talk about land. You don't talk at all. You lie back in the canoe as it rocks gently, watching the stars take their places in the sky like old friends gathering for a ceremony. You hum softly, one of the riddles. You don't know if it's right, but it feels right. And the canoe hums with you, gently correcting your course, like an old teacher who started to trust your hands. You see it before you believe it. This time, it's not a ghost island, not a trick of cloud and light, not a hopeful mirage born from seawater fatigue and vitamin deficiencies. It's real, solid, green, rising from the sea like a sleeping animal, tail curled around a reef, head crowned with palms. Land. And yet now he doesn't smile. You do. You grin like a lunatic. You try to stand up, almost tipping the canoe in the process, and now he just holds up one hand. Not yet, he warns. Why not, you ask? We're here? He narrows his eyes. You sure? You squint again. The island does look odd. Not wrong. Exactly. Just off. Too symmetrical. Too flat. You grab the paddle again and dig harder. Your arms aching, but your heart already halfway up a coconut tree. Naomi doesn't paddle. He just watches. As you approach, you realize something's changed. The air doesn't smell like it should. There's no scent of smoke or flowers or cooked taro, just salt and bird droppings. Also, no waves breaking against the shore, no sounds of people, no movement in the trees. In fact, are those trees? No, they're shrubs, short, windblown, scrubby. And the land itself isn't land, it's a coral atoll. Flat, barely above sea level, covered in bird colonies and sand, with the occasional lonely pandanus tree struggling to look important. False hope. Naomi finally says, not all land is a rival. You exhale. Not frustration, not anger, just exhaustion. You'd built the idea of land into salvation, into a cold drink, a hammock, a celebratory dance. But now you're just here, on a ring of coral, pecked at by seabirds, watching the sun bake the back of your hands. The island, if you can even call it that, offers no shelter, no food, no fresh water, just proof that your journey is still unfinished. You learn that this is common. Polynesian voyagers often mistook low-lying atolls for larger islands, and sometimes they landed at places too small or too harsh to support life. Some navigators left markers or sacred stones there, symbols of passage rather than settlement. You step onto the atoll anyway. The sand is warm, almost too warm. Birds shriek overhead. One poops directly in front of your foot. Welcome, Naomi says dryly. You sit. You let your hands fall into the sand. It's powdery, light, and somehow heavier than stone. You sit in silence for a long while. Then Naomi begins stacking stones. Just a small pile, 5 or 6, carefully balanced. You ask what it means. He answers without looking up. We thank the place, even if we cannot stay. And you realize that for the Polynesians, this was part of the rhythm. You don't only sail to places, you sail through them. Each island, even the disappointing ones, was a note in a larger song. You stack your own stones. They fall. You try again. Eventually, you get a small, shaky tower to stay upright. Then now he says, look, sky is wrong. You glance up. The sun has shifted. The birds are flying in strange loops. The wind smells off. We should go, he says. Why, the island's not going anywhere. No, he says, but we are. You nod. Back in the canoe, the air feels heavier. You paddle without being told. Naomi steers, scanning the sea with that tight squint you've come to recognize. Something's coming. You glance back at the atoll. It gets smaller, it gets softer, and then, somehow, it disappears, hidden behind haze, light, and distance, like it was never there. Historians have theories about this, how small islands can vanish even when they're still present, how changes in water height, cloud cover, and humidity create optical illusions So convincing that whole fleets missed land they were sailing directly toward. Some theories say it's psychological sailors saw what they wanted to see. But you know now, sometimes the island is real. It just isn't yours. That night, the stars return. They seem brighter, kinder somehow, like they heard you were having a rough day. You lie back on the canoe and ask now, "What's the word for an island that disappears?" He answers without hesitation, "Home." And you don't understand, but you feel it. Because part of you stayed back on that coral ring, next to the birds and the stone piles, and the dream that didn't quite come true. And another part of you paddles on, chasing a song you haven't finished singing yet. You nearly die on a reef. Not dramatically. There's no thunderclap, no kraken, no montage of your best moments flashing before your eyes. It's quieter than that, just a sudden scrape beneath the hull, a tilt of the canoe, and then the horrible, unmistakable crunch of wood-kissing coral. You both freeze. The sea looks calm, but you now know that reefs lurk just below the surface like teeth, sharp, ancient, and entirely disinterested in your survival. Naoe moves fast. He leans hard to one side, counterbalancing the canoe while shouting something sharp and syllabic. You copy him, too shocked to think. The canoe tilts back. You slide forward and slap the water with your paddle, spinning away from the jagged coral teeth just in time. Heart pounding, hands shaking. You look down, no water pouring in. A gouge, but not a fatal one. The canoe is still floating. Just barely. "Watch the green," Nayo says, once the silence returns. You glance around. The water here is a surreal turquoise beautiful, almost tropical poster perfect, and deadly. "Too light," he adds, "means shallow." You nod, adding that to your growing, panicky internal guidebook. If it looks like a postcard, it probably wants to kill you. He steers you toward a deeper blue patch, and soon you're past the reef, but not out of trouble. Your supplies are low, your arms are noodles, the canoe is scratched, and your confidence is leaking faster than your water gourd. Then, like a miracle or maybe just dumb luck, you see smoke. A faint thread of gray rising from a low curve of land on the horizon. This time, Nayo doesn't question it. He paddles hard. You follow, too tired to ask what makes this land different from the last. As you approach, shapes begin to take form. Palm trees, huts, outriggers pulled high on sand. People? And that's when Naui leans close and mutters, "Careful." What, why? He doesn't explain. The islanders come out to meet you. They don't look surprised, just wary. One man holds a long paddle like a staff. A woman behind him wears a necklace made of shark teeth. You suddenly become very aware that you are a stranger, arriving unannounced in a canoe that looks like it just survived a knife fight with a reef. Naoe says something in a soft voice. It's a language you don't recognize. The man with the staff listens, then nods. Tension thins. Still, no smiles. The woman steps forward and holds out her hand. You flinch until you see what's in it. "A coconut?" She hands it to you, cool, heavy, sloshing with water. Neo says, "You pay now." You blink. "Pay?" He points to the canoe. You reach for your pack, what's left of it. Inside, taro paste, a bit of dried fish, 2 old starfruit. It's not much. You look up, embarrassed. Naoe shrugs. Coconut diplomacy. It turns out, when ancient Polynesian voyagers landed on unfamiliar islands, diplomacy often began with food. If you gave generously, you were invited in. If not, things could go sideways fast. There are stories of travelers who were greeted with spears instead of snacks. You offer what you have. The woman accepts it. She doesn't smile, but she nods. And just like that, you're no longer a threat. You're a guest. You spend the afternoon with the villagers, They don't ask many questions. They don't seem interested in your journey. But they let you drink, eat, rest. They show Naui where to patch the canoe. A child offers you a carved bone hook for luck, they say, in the one word you both share. Later, Naui explains that these islands acted like pit stops for navigators, places of refuge, but also politics. Arriving without the proper offering or attitude could ruin everything. Historians often overlook this part of ancient voyaging. They focus on star charts and wind patterns, but alliances, reputation, even rumors mattered just as much. Some routes weren't taken because of tides. They were taken because someone's cousin knew someone's uncle who got a bad welcome back in 700 CE. You fall asleep that night in a borrowed hut, the smell of firewood and roasted yam filling the air. You hear laughter, drums, sea wind brushing the thatch. For the first time in days, you lie on a flat surface. And it feels strange. The ocean no longer rocks you. The canoe is anchored, alone on the beach. You miss it. You realize how much you've started to belong to the journey, how land, while necessary, feels more like an intermission than a destination. You stare up at the ceiling of woven palm leaves and think tomorrow, I'll paddle again. Not because I have to, but because the sea is still singing? And somewhere out there, the stars are waiting. The fire has died down. The stars above the village are different than the ones you've gotten used to, or maybe they're the same, just viewed from a slightly altered angle. That's a thing you've learned on this voyage, how just a few degrees can change everything. Naui is talking to someone quietly near the canoe, half in shadow. You're sitting alone by the embers, chewing a piece of roasted taro that tastes like smoke and chalk. It's good, you think, or maybe your mouth's just too grateful to complain. Eventually, Naui sits beside you. You hear the story he asks. You shake your head. What story? He glances toward the sea. This island remembers ones who never came back. You're quiet. It's the kind of thing he says sometimes that sounds like a parable but usually turns out to be literal. They left. Many seasons ago, he continues, 3 canoes, young navigators, looking for new land, never returned. Maybe they sank. Maybe they found something better. Maybe they became birds. You raise an eyebrow. Birds. He shrugs. It happens in the old stories. And that's when you realize this part of the journey isn't about learning what to do when you arrive. It's about understanding that sometimes, many times, people don't. Polynesian history is full of these whispered names. The voyagers who vanished. The routes that were never retraced. Islands that appear in old chants but not on maps. A cultural memory of exploration as both triumph and tragedy. Historians still argue whether certain island chains, especially in the far reaches of the Pacific, were settled once and then forgotten. Whether oral stories of floating lands and walking islands refer to real places or metaphor. There are artifacts found out of place, DNA traces with no explanation, canoe designs that show up on one island and then nowhere else. You ask Naui if he believes the lost ones are still out there. He pokes the fire with a stick. Not lost, he says, just changed. That night, an elder tells a tale by the fire. You don't catch every word, but the rhythm is unmistakable. It's a story of a voyager who steered by the wrong star, found an island made of glass, and sailed into the sky. The kids listen wide-eyed. No one laughs. Because these stories aren't entertainment. They're instruction manuals. Later, someone brings you a coconut shell carved with wave patterns. It's not a gift, exactly. More like a reminder. The elder says it belonged to one of the lost navigators. That someone found it years later washed ashore. No body, no canoe, just the shell, floating alone, still smelling faintly of salt and memory. You run your fingers over the carving. It feels like a fingerprint. And suddenly, The whole ocean feels haunted. Not in a scary way, but in the sense that you're never really alone out there. Every swell has been ridden. Every star has been followed. You're sailing in the wake of 1,000 invisible teachers. You walk to the beach. The canoe is waiting, tied just above the tide line, patched, quiet, whole again. You rest your hand on its side. Somewhere, you think, someone else is doing the same thing on another beach, on another island, maybe even another time. You wonder if you'll ever meet, or if they've already become part of the sea, part of the wind, part of the deep lore that hums under every journey. The next morning, Naue doesn't say goodbye to the villagers. He just nods. A subtle thank you, a silent agreement that you won't stay, but you'll remember. You paddle out with the tide. Behind you, the island shrinks. The smoke from the fires becomes a thin line. The people become dots. And then they vanish. Another dot on your inner map, another mystery half solved. Did they really become birds, you ask? Naue squints at the sky. Some say dolphins. Some say stars. You smile. What do you say? He smiles back. I say, they never got lost. You paddle until your arms hurt, until the reef is behind you, until the canoe rocks steady once more and the stars return to their proper positions. The sea opens up ahead of you again, vast and indifferent. And once again, you go forward. Because that's what navigators do. Even when no one's left to tell the story. The sea is quieter now. Not calm, never truly calm, but quieter. As if the ocean knows you've passed some test, that you've crossed an invisible line from guest to traveler. Or maybe it's just giving you one last chance to rest before it throws another puzzle your way. You paddle beside Naue in a silence that's less awkward now, more companionable, the kind of silence you get between people who've seen each other vomit in storms and cry at false islands and still manage to share dried fish without resentment. In the distance, you spot another canoe. It's smaller than yours. A single paddler, cutting across the waves with surprising speed. As it nears, you recognize the strange elegance of their technique, each stroke perfectly timed, barely splashing. They pass with a nod, no words exchanged. Naue says softly, training. For what you ask? For nothing and everything. You turn to look, but the paddler's already a speck behind you, vanishing into the swell. Later that day, Naue steers toward a strip of coastline, low, weather-beaten, lined with jagged rocks and skeletal trees. It doesn't look like much, not welcoming, not useful, but you pull the canoe ashore anyway. Waiting for you is something unexpected: a school. Not with desks or blackboards, just a circle of canoes, pulled up into the grass, and a few older men and women sitting cross-legged in the sand, surrounded by children who watch the sky like they're reading a comic book. It's a modern navigator's school, one of the last. Naue greets them with a single phrase. They nod, gesture for you to sit. Someone offers you fruit. Someone else hands you a carved stick, etched with stars and birds. You realize it's a teaching tool. Here, there are no GPS units, no instruments, just memory, rhythm, songs. A boy no older than 12 stands and recites a verse that maps an entire route between islands. It takes him 3 minutes. You can't even remember your hotel room number back home. A girl sings the name of every star that rises in summer from this exact shoreline. Each star is linked to a story, each story to a direction, each direction to a life lived on water. You watch, amazed? Then Naue nudges you. Your turn, he says. You blink. To do what? He nods at the children. Tell what you know. You laugh nervously. I barely know anything. Then tell that. So you do. You tell them about the first time you drank seawater and nearly choked, about how the canoe slapped you every time you tried to steer it wrong, how you mistook a bird's bathroom break for a sign from the ancestors. They laugh, not unkindly. Then you tell them about the first time you felt the direction, not just followed it, about the ghost island, about the birds that always know more than you, about the way the stars seem to whisper when you stop trying so hard to hear them. When you finish, one of the elders simply says, "Good." Not great, not inspiring, just good. You'll take it. That night, you sit by the fire with the other students. You don't speak. You just listen as they sing old navigation songs. Some have been passed down unbroken for centuries. Others are new adaptations, remixes, updates for a world that now contains cargo ships and satellites and rising seas. Because here's the truth, the world these voyagers once knew is disappearing. Climate change is swallowing islands. Currents are shifting. Plastic rides the waves alongside fish. The skies are still full of stars, but the ground beneath them is more uncertain than ever. Historians still argue whether traditional navigation can survive, whether it can adapt, whether it should be preserved in museums or kept alive through use. But these people, the ones around this fire, aren't debating. They're doing every paddle stroke, every song, every lesson, a defiance against forgetting. You realize you're not here to learn it all. You can't. That was never the point. You're here to witness, to remember, to paddle with respect, and to pass along whatever you can, even if it's just a story. The next morning, you and Naoe leave without fanfare. He doesn't say goodbye, neither do you. You paddle out together as the children practice chants on the beach, their voices rising like birdsong. As the island disappears behind you, you don't feel sad. You feel lucky. Because for one brief moment, you were part of something almost gone, and still very much alive. Your hands are calloused now. You notice it one morning as you tighten the lashings on a side float. Your skin, once soft and blistered, has grown rough. The pain that used to come with every paddle stroke is gone, replaced by something sturdier, familiar, like your body has finally decided to cooperate with this life. You and Naoe haven't spoken much in the last day. There's no need. Your movements are in sync now. You don't need to ask where you're going, you know, or at least, you trust the canoe does. Sometimes, that's the same thing. The sea is wide open again. Endless. And yet, it feels smaller now, not in a limiting way, but in an intimate one. Like you're no longer just floating on top of it, but inside it. Like it knows you, and you know a tiny piece of it. You ask Naoe if there's a final destination. He shakes his head. You passed land days ago. That throws you. You mean, yes, but we kept going. You want to be annoyed, confused, grateful. You feel all three. Why? He stares ahead, because you weren't ready to stop. You let that sit. He's right. The idea of land of ending no longer feels like the goal. The journey has become something else entirely. A rhythm, a practice, a kind of meditation. That evening, he teaches you one last chant. It's quieter than the others, almost whispered. The tune feels ancient, older than islands, maybe even older than stars. You don't understand the words, but you don't need to. The melody says enough. It's a chant for endings, not goodbyes, just the gentle closing of one tide before the next begins. You join him, singing softly under your breath as the sun dips low. The sky bleeds gold and lavender. The sea, for once, lies still. As darkness folds in, you find yourself humming that tune over and over, committing it to your bones. Not your brain, your bones. Like Naoe said, the chant isn't something you memorize, It's something you become. And then, almost imperceptibly, the stars begin to rise. First one, then another, then a dozen. You greet them like old friends. There's no test now, no pressure, just starlight on water, wind on skin, the faint creak of the canoe's frame as it carries you onward, somewhere. You smile. You don't need to know where. Because you are, at last, a part of the song. The sea is quiet now. The canoe drifts slowly, cradled by gentle swells that rise and fall like a slow, steady breath. Overhead, the stars pulse softly in the dark, ancient and unblinking. You lie back, eyes half-lidded, watching them swirl into familiar constellations, no longer confusing strangers, but old companions who have guided you for days, maybe even lifetimes. The air is warm, thick with salt and calm. You can feel the ocean's rhythm in your body now. Your shoulders sway without thinking. Your breath matches the tide. Even your heart beats slower, fuller, deeper. You let your hands trail in the water. There's no urgency, no destination, just motion and stillness in perfect balance. Somewhere behind you lies land. Somewhere ahead, another island waits. But here, in this moment, there's only peace. The canoe creaks once, gently, like it's exhaling too. Even Niue is quiet now. No riddles, no chants, just the hush of someone who knows that nothing else needs to be said. You close your eyes. The stars remain, dancing softly behind your lids. The ocean rocks you gently. The canoe hums beneath you, steady and kind. And as the wind sighs across your skin like a lullaby, your thoughts drift like feathers into the night. Not lost, just floating. Safe? And slowly, finally, you fall asleep.